members. The Deputy Speaker.
Are there any constituency statements by honourable members? The member for Kingsford Smith.
Thank you, Speaker. Recently I was delighted to attend the 90th anniversary celebrations for the Australasian Hellenic Education Progressive Association, or AHEPA, as it's affectionately known. I joined His Bishop, Grace Iviakos of Metsilibos, along with Theo Skinnis, the Grand President of the Grand Lodge of AHEPA, and Sophia Nataris, the National Supreme President of AHEPA Australia, and many more Australians of Hellenic heritage to celebrate nearly a century of heritage service and cultural enrichment. AHEPA today is a beacon of Hellenism and is a testament to the enduring spirit of the Greek community and their contribution to Australia. Of course, the country's connection with Greece is profound, from our capital cities to our towns like Werris Creek, Gunnedah and Scone, all of which have been an important part of the formation of AHEPA. Greeks have done so much to shape the face of our modern nation. In my own electorate of Kingsford Smith, we've got a thriving Greek community, and 2024 holds additional significance for the Greek Orthodox community with the 100th anniversary of the establishment of the Holy Archdiocese of Australia. AHEPA members are united in their commitment to philanthropy, education and cultural exchange, and their charitable endeavours from medical research to the support of the aged and disadvantaged reflect the very best of that ethos. Congratulations and thank you to everyone involved in AHEPA over the last 90 years. Speaker, I'd also like to acknowledge 40 years of wonderful service by Rabbi Aloza Gestetner and Rebbitzin Miri Gestetner. Together, they've led the Coogee Synagogue for 40 years over this special time, and I was delighted to join hundreds of people from the local Jewish community to celebrate their leadership of the congregation recently. It's another milestone for an amazing couple who are the longest serving Jewish congregation leaders in Australia, and that's something that our community is very, very proud of. Rabbi Aloza and Miri have led the services and the pastoral care of their community for that period. They run a synagogue known as the Great Little Central Synagogue by the Sea at Coogee. It was founded in 1950 by Holocaust survivors who left the devastation of post-war Europe for a new beginning in our community. Under the leadership of Aloza and Miri, the Coogee Synagogue has grown to a membership of now over 300, and for the past 40 years the Gestetners have officiated at 515 bar and bat mitzvahs, in itself an amazing achievement. They're wonderful contributors to our community. They're much beloved. Miri runs a wonderful childcare and community centre there, and they do so much for our community. Congratulations to Aloza and Miri Gestetner.
Thank you. The member for Barker.
Deputy Speaker, August is Tradie National Health Month, a time to invest in tradie health. While the original intent of Tradies Health Month is to encourage tradies to invest in their physical health, I want to take this opportunity to talk about mental health. 1 in 5 Australians will develop a mental health condition at some stage in their lives. Anxiety and depression are the most common mental illnesses in Australia. Everyone is vulnerable to experiencing mental health at some point, even tradies. It affects people regardless of age, education, income or culture. Building strong friendships with your mates and working with a crew you can trust is a great way to keep mentally well as looking out for others. Now, Madam Deputy Speaker, my message here today is don't ever forget the power of a simple conversation. Now, this trademark shirt that I'm wearing may not strictly meet the parliamentary dress code, but it's important for mental health amongst tradies. They're designed to make the invisible impossible to ignore and get blue-collar Aussies talking about how they're really doing. In 2015, Trademark co-founder and carpenter Dan Allen lost his best mate to suicide. His apprentice and co-founder Ed Ross was Dan's support as he worked through the aftermath, trying to process the grief. It was during that time that Dan and Ed recognised the closed-off conversationalist culture on work sites around the country. There was a lack of meaningful conversations about life's struggles. The shirts were developed to start the necessary conversation amongst tradies, and the counselling services soon followed. When you need a little more than a conversation with a mate, the best thing to do is to reach out to a professional. While many tradies are still reluctant to seek professional help, it doesn't have to be that daunting. This is a conversation starter, or TAX as it has now been known, doesn't just make great shirts like this one. The organisation provides professional mental health counselling to Australia's blue-collar community. TAX removes the physical and financial barriers to accessing help through a simple text and call service directly to professional counsellors. It's free, it's professional, and it's confidential. It's available between the hours of 8 in the morning and 10 at night via text or call, and most importantly, it's designed specifically for the blue-collar workforce, meaning that whether you're a tradie, a farmer, a truck driver, they'll speak your language. So if you want to take the first step to improving your mental health this Tradie Mental Health Month, start the conversation by texting 0488 846 988, and a TAX crew will be there to listen and work with you to make a real difference.
I thank the member. The member for Macquarie.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. In a local government area that is 3,000 kilometres square, roads matter. I want to highlight the major funding role the Albanese Labor government has in supporting Hawkesbury Council to improve local roads. This is on top of the tens of millions of dollars in disaster funding that has passed through to Council through joint state-federal arrangements for road repairs. So let's go through a quick list. One of my key election commitments was $11.2 million to improve local roads. Hawkesbury Council has added $7 million to that program, and that means 15 roads projects have started or are being delivered over the next 12 months. I'll run through some of the roads Council has chosen sections of. Kermond Road, Kermond, Argyle Street, Blackman Crescent, Berger Road and White Place, South Windsor, Grosvale Road and Riverview Street, North Richmond, Comleroy Road, East Currajong, Spinks Road, Glossodia, Bowen Mountain Road. In Oakville and Moralia, Oakville Road, Boundary Road and Skyville Road, Wire Lane, Freeman's Reach and Packer Road, Blackslands Ridge. I'm very pleased the Albanese government is the major funder of these improvements. The Black Spot program also provides a source of funding for Hawkesbury Council, another program we've increased funding for. The most recent round is $3.6 million for safety improvements at 5 known crash sites. They are Old Pit Town Road at Oakville, Freeman's Reach Road, Tennyson Road, Spinks Road and Hankel Road. The same program has previously provided more than $1 million to upgrade part of St Albans Road and $500,000 for Francis Street in Richmond. But one of the really key sources of roads funding for Hawkesbury Council is roads to recovery. Many of the roads you've seen already repaired in the Hawkesbury have been done under this funding. We're progressively doubling funding to $1 billion annually, twice what the Liberals provided. What that means is the Hawkesbury can count on $9.6 million for roads to recovery over the next 5 years. It starts with $1.4 million this financial year and continues to rise over the life of that 5-year agreement. You'll have seen some of the funding in action with work on Old Pit Town Road at Oakville and Spinks Road, Glossodia, and East Currajong Road's also on the list with $1 million investment. Hawkesbury Council is responsible for arranging for the work to be done, but there are no shortages of funds for the roads they've chosen as their priorities. This is serious funding provided to your Hawkesbury Council so they can do a better job of fixing the roads they're responsible for. And of course, this is on top of all of that council funding. There is funding for the New South Wales government. There's the $100 million we're providing to New South Wales to upgrade sections of Bell's Line of Road, plus the $400 million for the Richmond Bridge and Approaches major project.
Thank you. The member for Durack.
I'm pleased to say that show season is up and running in the mighty electorate of Durack. Already we've had the Moondine Festival in 2J, which I was pleased to attend earlier this year. This is a very special show as people dressed in pioneer costume are transformed back to the era of Moondyne Joe with reenactments of his escapades, arrest and mock trial. While we may have just had the Summer Olympics in Paris, at the Kununurra show there was the equally serious Watermelon Olympics, another fantastic event showcasing the beautiful East Kimberley. We've recently had shows across the Pilbara with the Spinifex Carnival in Port Hedland, the Fernacling Festival in Karratha and the Outback Fortescue Festival in Newman. Together with the Pilbara Liberals, it was great to see the fantastic Liberal candidate for the electorate of the Pilbara, Amanda Kalis, who was there representing the regional Liberal team. The Minganoo Expo has just taken place, another great success with many dropping by to participate in the very world-famous jelly bean counting competition and to guess how many jelly beans are in the jar. I, of course, appreciate the counting efforts of my team. Next Wednesday, I'm off to Darwin for their Machinery Field Days. This is an event that brings thousands of Western Australians from the city and the bush. I'm looking forward to catching up once again with the local farmers and also representatives from Keep the Sheep. I'd like to take this opportunity to invite the Prime Minister to Darwin. But a warning, if he does, I would caution him not to make any poor jokes about live export like he did the other night at the Agri-Futures event, which was supposed to be about celebrating rural women. Unsurprisingly, jests about destroying people's livelihoods, well, that's not going to go down too well in Darwin. My prediction is that the Labor tent at Darwin is going to be a very lonely, sad place. Also still to come are shows in Mullawa, Chapman Valley, York, Northam, Northampton, Moora and 2J. I am passionate about the shows and the agricultural field days in Durack. They provide a fantastic opportunity for people to accidentally start a conversation with their local member. Whilst we all know that not all community members want to call by your office or write a letter, many often stop by at the shows and take the opportunity to have a chat with their federal member. Understandably, my team and I have been hearing about the rising cost of living and the higher interest rates, which are causing tremendous pain for so many families across the Durack community. But, of course, these shows just don't happen. They require hours and hours of volunteer time and focus. So I would like to thank all of the show organisers and the hundreds of volunteers for all of their hard work. You do your communities so proud by continuing to hold these shows and to set up the shows year after year, which are a centrepiece of every town's calendar.
Thank you. The member for Eden Monero.
Thank you. And on Saturday last week, Tathra lost a local legend, Rob Little, known as Frog to so many people. Frog and Val were publicans of the iconic Tathra pub during the 80s and 90s and established it as the South Coast pub rock venue. And they had the likes of Cold Chisel, Midnight Oil, In Excess, Rose Tattoo and Mental as Anything performed there. Frog was a legend, and the 1957 Buddy Holly song Peggy Sue was his favourite. And all of these now household names knew that they had to sing Peggy Sue with him on stage on an encore of the night that they performed. When Rose Tattoo performed, Angry Anderson came up to him and said, "We won't do Peggy Sue, mate." And he said, "That's fine. I didn't think a hard rock band would do that." Come the next year, Angry Anderson showed up and he said to Frog after he gave him a hug, "We've been practising Peggy Sue, mate." This is the guy he was. He was instrumental in starting the Tathra Sea Eagles AFL club. It formed in 1983. He was the club's first president. He was a life member. He was instrumental in sponsoring players, giving players jobs, getting people to the club. And he was so much more than just a person to the people that walked through the Lawrence Park gates. Frog was a man of deep passion, deep commitment, and he was a man of routine. Somebody who, early morning fishing, he would mow the lawns of a couple of businesses. He looked after his lemon trees, and he would ring my husband every Wednesday night at 6 p.m. on the dot for months on end to make sure that he could get Brad to the footy club. He's well known across our community and he will be deeply missed by everyone. Val, I know at this point in time, will be doing it tough because Frog was her constant companion for many, many, many years. Frog is survived by Val, his 3 sons, Anthony, Doug and David, their wives and grandchildren. Vale Frog, I look forward to getting down to Lawrence Park on the 30th for one last celebration with VB in hand, with Buddy Holly's songs going, and we thank you for all that you've done for Tathra and for our community.
Thank you. The member for Wide Bay.
Thanks, Deputy Speaker. Today I rise to honour the memory of one of Wide Bay's great people, Mike Oswald. Mike was a long-time resident of Gympie and Monto, and he recently passed away while visiting his daughter and granddaughters in Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia. Mike's passing was mourned by many who travelled far to pay their respects at St Patrick's Church in Gympie. The funeral service was jointly conducted by Friar Louis Jimenez and St Patrick's Parish, and Mick Peters, a former schoolmate of Mike's from Nudgee College in Brisbane. The eulogy was delivered by Mike's eldest son, Mark Oswald. The service was characteristic of an Oswald affair, with significant music contributions performed by family members and the Gympie Pitch Inn Choir. Mike had a strong sense of community and was an active member of numerous community organisations, most of which were represented at the funeral and the wake. His life was characterised by a relentless devotion to self-reliance and independence, the kind of determination synonymous with his generation. The first 40 years of Mike's life were spent on the Monto dairy farm, after which he moved to Gympie region and embarked on a career in real estate, specialising in agricultural properties across the Gympie and Greater Wide Bay regions. Joined by his wife Gina, Mike took a decade away from real estate to run a family-operated tourist park on Mary River on the Arnhem Highway in the Northern Territory before returning to Gympie and restarting the real estate business. He continued to work in real estate well into his 70s, with some of his best years in business being his final ones. The great turnout observed at his funeral service and wake was a testament to the life he lived and the relationships he formed, a life well lived. Mike was a source of unwavering support, always there to offer guidance and encouragement. His love was a constant in the lives of his family and friends, and his absence leaves a void that words cannot fulfil. While we mourn the loss of Mike, we also celebrate the legacy he leaves behind. His spirit lives on in the values he imparted and the lives he touched and the love he shared. I extend my condolences to Gina and all of Mike's family. Rest in peace, Mike Oswald.
Thank you. The member for Werriwa.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. In July 23, a student of Thomas Hassell Anglican College, Vansh Maney, represented Australia in the US Open World Martial Arts Championships held in Orlando, Florida. I had the pleasure of meeting Vansh and his mum Dristri before the tournament and presenting him with an Australian flag. He was the first ever Australian black belt to perform at the closing night of victory. Returning this year, Vansh performed extremely well again. He finished the tournament with 4 championship wins and 2 bronze medals. He also won the Night of Victory Championship, making him the first Australian to win the event. I'd like to thank Drishti, Vance's mum, for keeping me up to date with all his achievements. Vance represented not only himself but our community so well and has made us all proud. To see him pictured with his trophies and medals, holding up the Australian flag that I presented him a little over a year ago, was inspirational. His successes are amazing, given he's 13 years old, and I'm eager to see his continued success throughout his life and what his future holds. Best wishes in the next competition. Celebrations for birthdays that end in 0 are very important, and thankfully our community had a 60th birthday to celebrate last month. Established in July 1964, Liverpool Quota has been raising money to support those in need in our community since then. Over the last 60 years, the club has had over 167 members and boasts 1,000 years of membership. It was a privilege to speak at the event and in a small way acknowledge the dedication and work of Quota Liverpool. Acknowledgement and special thanks have to go to all of the families and friends who support the Quota ladies, helping with barbecues, filling tables for fundraising events. Over the years, the club has supported children with speech therapy when their families couldn't afford the cost, made breakfast at school breakfast clubs, donated to the Shepherd Centre, Women's Refuge, Miracle Babies, the Cancer Council, Melanoma Research, and the list is too long to complete here. On the day, the club had prepared 30 scrolls, which were read by attendees, each listing achievements, events and support over the last 60 years. Thank you to President Julie Percival and all the organisers, especially June Young, a stalwart member of our community. No function is complete without a birthday cake, and the cake was cut by the longest-serving members, Judy Blackburn and Lorraine Perry. Please consider joining Liverpool Quota if you're able. I know they'd love some extra helping hands, and the difference that they make in our community so often is really important. So if you've got some time, get in contact with Liverpool Quota. You can do that by ringing our office and I'll make sure that your details go through.
Thank you. The member for Sturt.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. I'm sure most members have the same challenge in their electorates as I do, which is a drastic shortage of quality sporting infrastructure for the great boom that is going on in sports participation, particularly female participation in traditionally male-dominated sports. It's very difficult in a long-developed community like my own to find new open space opportunities to develop, and throughout the eastern and northeastern suburbs of Adelaide, that is a problem across many sporting codes. Obviously, traditional clubs have their grounds, but as their membership is swelling, particularly with the growth in female participation in codes like Aussie rules and soccer and cricket, the clubs can't keep up with that excellent growth with their existing facilities. And there are other sports that have lost their homes as land has been developed over the previous few decades and have for a long time had to make do with temporary or remote to their location places to train and places to compete. So there's a very significant opportunity in my electorate that I hope won't be lost to it to develop a multi-purpose piece of sporting and recreational infrastructure. Now, the University of Adelaide and the University of South Australia have concluded plans to merge, and that obviously means that the various campuses of both institutions are coming together under the one banner. Now, with that is the proposal to close down the McGill campus of the University of South Australia, which has a number of elements to it, particularly significant heritage assets, but also open space playing fields. Now, the state government are at this stage indicating that that will be developed to the highest value use, which really means high density housing. And that decision needs to be reversed, and we need to protect that open space and in fact invest in that open space to be sporting infrastructure for the many clubs that would love the opportunity to create a home for themselves on that land. Now, I'm talking particularly about the parcel east of St Bernard's Road in opposite the UniSA McGill campus. It is prime opportunity for open space recreational sporting infrastructure, and I certainly will fight here in Canberra to help get the financial support to developing that land, but first the land needs to be made available. And I urge the state government to reverse their decision to turn it into dense, high-dense housing and instead provide it to the local council so that we can work together to develop it into high-quality recreational sporting facilities for all the local residents of the eastern and northeastern suburbs.
Thank you. The member for Jagga Jagga.
Speaker, recently I had the privilege of presenting leadership, academic and other awards to students at Greensborough College. Greensborough College is a fantastic school where the principal, staff and students all embody the school's values of courage, aspiration, respect and equality. On the same day, I also visited Rosanna Primary School to present their Semester 2 leaders with their awards. Again, a wonderful local school with a truly caring principal, staff and students who live their school values. And it's really heartening as the local member to see all these young people in our community flourishing and being set up for the best possible future. And I'm proud to be a member of a Labor government that's doing the work to fund our public schools. We want to make sure that the extra money we've put on the table does make a difference to kids who really need it. Deputy Speaker, Himalo Community Connect does really important work supporting our local Somali community in Jaga Jaga. And so I am very pleased that the Albanese Labor government is supporting them with $100,000 funding. Himalo is based at the Bell Street Mall and partners with a wide range of organisations, institutions and services to increase participation, build capacity, create valuable connections and open opportunities for success in education, employment, health and social cohesion. The $100,000 funding will be used to develop and deliver programs that promote social cohesion among young people in the Somali community, and this is particularly important at this time. I would like to thank Himalo managers Abdi Aziz Farah and Pam Burley, along with all their staff, who I know work so hard on behalf of community and addressing needs that are there. Abdi and Pam really show how deeply they care for our local Somali community and our wider community. And I'm so proud that as the Albanese Labor government, we're able to work with them to deliver this important initiative. Deputy Speaker, Paralympics are upon us, and Jared Clifford is a Jaga Jaga local who has always dreamed big, knowing from an early age that he wanted to be a Paralympian. Proudly raised in Jaga Jaga, Jared has proven himself a true inspiration and a source of pride for the Diamond Valley community. Jared began his athletics journey with the fantastic Diamond Valley Athletics Club, and a huge shout out to them. They have continued to be incredibly supportive, I know, to Jared and to many other young people in our community who are pursuing their passion for athletics. Next week, Jared will be competing in his third Paralympics Games in Paris, participating in the T12-13 visually impaired 1500 metre and 5000 metre events. Jared, you continue to inspire our community. We will all be watching you with pride. Go well. I am sure you will get the race you deserve, and we will all be backing you.
Thank you. The member for Melbourne.
There's not a gas shortage in Australia, there's a shortage of integrity. There's a shortage of politicians who actually represent their constituents, not the interests of the coal and gas corporations paying them off. One nurse should not pay more tax than 33 big gas corporations. One teacher shouldn't pay more tax than 21 big coal corporations. Together, in the 10 years between...
has been called for in the House. The proceedings are suspended to enable honourable members to attend the division. The proceedings will resume when the Chair of the Federation Chamber is resumed at the conclusion of the division or subsequent divisions.
Yeah, we're still finishing constituency statements, so it'd be Mr. Band's continuation. So it's not here. It's the last one.
Oh, good. I call the member for Melbourne in continuation.
Together in the 10 years between 2014 and 2024, all the teachers in the country together paid twice as much tax as the entire oil and gas sector. The government gets more money from HECS and related student loans than from the gas tax, the PRRT, which is designed to raise revenue from the oil and gas corporations. The Labor government fails to even mention the profiteering of the big corporations and the role that that plays in driving up the cost of living. And rather than cracking down on the big supermarkets, the Prime Minister is more likely to dress up in a Coles high-vis top and pose for photos with them. And rather than making big mining corporations pay their fair share, the Prime Minister is more likely to have dressed up in a Rio Tinto shirt. That's because this Prime Minister is more concerned with managing the economy for the profits of big corporations and billionaires than he is with the concerns of everyday people. While Australians are struggling to keep a roof over their head, being smashed at the supermarket and paying too much on their power bills, the Labor government is backing big corporations. In the past year, in the middle of a cost of living crisis, CEOs are giving themselves double-digit pay rises while many of the same corporations call for wage restraint from their workers. And we now have over 3.3 million people living in poverty. The number of people who can't find an affordable place to live grows, as does the number of people who are homeless. People are skipping meals so their kids don't miss out. The country's economy is rigged. Labor and Liberal both take huge donations from these big corporations. Labor and Liberal have both refused to make them pay their fair share, and Labor and the Liberals have both refused to do anything about the price gouging from big corporations. People are fed up with the Coles and Woolies of politics, ripping them off at every turn. It's why people tell me every day that they think it's harder and harder to tell Labor and the Liberals apart. But it doesn't have to be this way. We can make the big corporations pay their fair share of tax. We can make groceries cheaper by making price gouging illegal. We can freeze rent increases and drive down the cost of housing. If we make the big corporations pay their fair share of tax, we can actually get to the heart of what's driving the cost of living crisis and start to invest in people. Now, we know these changes are going to be tough to achieve and that they won't happen overnight, but the first step is voting for someone who will fight for you. You can't keep voting for the same two parties and expecting a different result.
I note that in accordance with Standing Order 193, the time for members' constituency statements has concluded, and I call the clerk.
Committee and delegation business. Order of the day number 1, Standing Committee on Climate Change, Energy, Environment and Water, Drowning and Waste, Plastic Pollution in Australia's Oceans and Waterways, resumption of debate on the motion of the member for Macon.
The question is that the document be noted, and I call the member for Cunningham.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. I rise to speak to the House of Representatives Standing Committee on Climate Change, Energy, Environment and Water's final report of the inquiry into the impact of plastic pollution on Australia's oceans and waterways. The report is titled Drowning in Waste: Plastic Pollution in Australia's Oceans and Waterways. This inquiry was requested by the Minister for Environment and Water, the Honourable Tanya Plibersek, in October 2022. It has had a particular lens on the impact of plastic pollution in oceans and waterways, including microplastics. The terms of reference set by the committee covered consideration of the effectiveness of Australia's management framework under the National Plastics Plan, the Australian Government engagement with states, territories, industries and non-government organisations, community campaigns and current global initiatives. 71 submissions were received by the committee from around the country and represented a broad cross-section of government, the science and academic community, industry including manufacturing, retail and peak organisations, environmental organisations and community groups. One submission that I would like to draw particular attention to is that of one of my constituents, Susie Crick. Susie is the CEO of the Oceanic Research Institute and branch president of the Surfrider Foundation. She is passionate about transitioning from plastics to more sustainable materials, and throughout her submission made a harrowing quote that I thought of often during the inquiry. Her quote was, "It will be challenging to make the shift from the convenience of plastic, but because we touch plastic more than we do our loved ones." In June 2023, the committee travelled to Adelaide, Perth, Melbourne and Sydney to make site visits and engage in 4 of the 6 public hearings that were conducted. During the Adelaide site visits, we met with AUSMAP, who are a nationwide citizen science program that aims to quantify microplastic pollution with the primary goals of identifying litter hotspots and assisting in source reduction. Separate from participating in the inquiry, AUSMAP were awarded a National Science Week grant in 2023 and took their passion on the road. Their first 2 events of National Science Week 2023 were held in Wollongong, with AUSMAP's Research Director, Dr Scott, and Juniper, their Science Officer, running an AUSMAP Training Day and Community Day, inspiring and engaging the local community. Sampling at the Belmore Basin site in my electorate saw rubber crumb fragments coming from local playgrounds, found at the beach sample collected, raising some important conversations around the issue. Whilst this report primarily reflects evidence dating from late 2022 into early 2023, the committee recognises that this report does not encompass the full story of plastics pollution. Since the Senate Environment and Communications Reference Committee inquiry into the then current research and understanding of plastic pollution reported in 2016, evidence documenting the extent and impact of plastic pollution has grown exponentially. Plastic undoubtedly plays a significant role in almost every area of life. It is the most prevalent of human-made products and is used across diverse sectors. It is lightweight, mouldable, durable, cheap to produce and performs critical functions, including within the medical industry and for food protection and preservation. However, its environmental impact is now a source of great concern. The persistence of plastic in the environment after disposal has created a significant problem globally. Pertinently said by DECU in their submission, plastics can leak into the terrestrial environment at various stages of their life cycle and end up in our oceans. They can easily spread all over the world via air, natural and man-made waterways and oceans. From terrestrial environments, large river systems have been identified as the main pathways that spread plastics into our oceans, and plastic has been found in every corner of the earth. From the Arctic oceans to the sea ice around Antarctica, and in the deepest oceanic trench on Earth, the Mariana Trench, estimated to be over 10,000 metres deep, there is plastic to be found. Toothbrushes, bottle caps, cigarette lighters and other hard plastic items and fragments are found in the stomachs and remains of many marine species that have died slowly and painfully from starvation. The most common entanglement injuries to sea turtles, seabirds, whales and marine mammals occurred from discarded fishing gear or ghost nets, plastic bags, clothing, rope and six-pack rings, causing restricted mobility, scoliosis, starvation, smothering and wounding, which in turn leads to infections, amputation of limbs and death. While some microplastics are intentionally produced for use in consumer products, through weathering and wave action, larger pieces of plastic in the ocean can break down over time, becoming microplastics, fragments smaller than 5 millimetres in diameter. This means that plastic can enter the lower level of the food chain, consumed by smaller marine wildlife such as fish, crustaceans and plankton, which then in turn moves up the food chain. Adding to the complexity of environmental impact, plastics contain a diversity of chemical additives that can leach into the air, soil and water at every phase of the product's life cycle. The current estimation of 150 million metric tonnes of waste plastic in the ocean is expected to quadruple by 2040, just 16 years away. If no action is taken, it is predicted that in only 26 years' time, the amount of plastic in the ocean will outweigh fish. Australians consume plastic at 3 times the global average, and this rate continues to grow. Except for Singapore, Australia's consumption of single-use plastics per person is higher than any other country in the world. This is not a new problem, but it is an enduring and insidious problem. It will not be solved overnight, but it cannot be ignored. We need to take decisive steps towards making a real difference now and into the future. The committee has therefore made 22 recommendations that emphasise collaboration, consistent national standards, bolstering existing schemes and developing new approaches and research, and measures to mitigate the complexity of challenges we face. The recommendations give attention to the challenges faced in remote areas of Australia and to engagement and collaboration with overseas institutions. The committee recommends that the Australian Government, through DECU and in consultation with state and territory governments, industry and the community, develop an updated national plastics plan. The updated plan, based on an overarching circular economy, should contain reporting and transparency measures to monitor progress and accountability and be in place within 12 months of the tabling of this report. The Department should report to Parliament on the progress of key actions through its annual report. Included in the plan, we recommend developing policies that track and limit polymer production in Australia, aim to reduce and enable visibility of the composition of imported plastics, and in collaboration with industry, strengthen product stewardship and the use of recycled content. The department should also engage with industry to revise and strengthen the goals included in the National Packaging Targets 2025. We recommend that the Australian Government take a leadership role in coordinating and tracking the reduction of the use of plastics, harmonise, standardise and expand programs already in place, such as single-use plastic bans, single-use plastic bans, the container deposit system and waste collection systems. Standardise and simplify plastic packaging and labelling, and develop and fund a comprehensive and nationwide public awareness and education campaign that includes impacts and risks associated with microplastics. Giving further regard to microplastics, the department should commission comprehensive research to determine the impacts of microplastics ingestion, inhalation and skin contact, including absorbed toxins on humans, and with the initial research to be made public in July 2026. And additionally, the government should engage with the Environment Ministers' meeting to prioritise a national microplastic reduction strategy. As a matter of urgency, the Australian Government should prioritise a sustainable end market for recovered plastics, considering incentives or mandates and including options for rural and remote areas. Additionally, the department should conduct a feasibility study into appropriate plastic disposal options for rural and regional areas, with the development of pilot programs by December 2025. In the development of any targeted solutions, the department should ensure that First Nations peoples are included, consulted and actively involved. I want to thank those who brought to this inquiry their expertise, passion and time through hearings and submissions, and to the Committee Secretariat for their hard work. I commend the report to the Chamber. Thank you.
The question is that the document be noted, and I call the member for Riverina.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. This shirt I'm wearing, made from Australian cotton, an industry which has been demonised by many in this place. Cotton is a very, very good agricultural product, and Australian cotton growers do it better than any other nation on earth. But this shirt has a number of plastic buttons on it. I've put in place plastic collar stays to make my tie sit better, and that's all well and good. But when these shirts come in the boxes, when these shirts are bought from stores, they contain so many pins and bits of plastic, round the collar, right through it, sleeves, cuffs, the whole bit. It is unbelievable. And it's not just shirts, it's just about every product we buy now comes wrapped in plastic, comes with so much material around it. It's not just to safeguard people from whatever condition that the makers might think that is going to befall them when they open it. It's just nonsense. And what we're seeing is this deluge of plastic being forced upon a society that puts consumerism above all else. Now, the House of Representatives Standing Committee on Climate Change, Energy, Environment and Water concluded its inquiry into plastic pollution in Australia's oceans and waterways earlier this year. Tabled a report, May 28, the final report, which was tabled in Parliament that day, made 22 recommendations aimed at strengthening Australia's plastics management framework to minimise plastic waste to landfill, incentivise the use of recycled materials in the production of new plastics and strengthen management of the plastics already in the environment. Now, the chair of the committee was the member for Macon, and the comments that he made at the time I very much agree with, and I think any person who is concerned not just about the here and now, but indeed about the future of our planet, would also agree with much of what the member for Macon said. Without urgent action, plastic waste will increase and continue to negatively impact
our oceans and waterways. That's what he said. He continued, Australia needs to act now to protect its natural environment for future generations. And he's right, of course. He's absolutely correct. Now, I am the Shadow Minister for International Development and the Pacific, and I've gone to the Pacific on a number of occasions in my shadow portfolio work. One of the big issues, of course, in the Pacific is the Great Pacific Garbage Patch. Now, this whirlpool of pollution is larger than many European countries, and what a sad reality that is. And it contains, as the member for Cunningham has just said, in its deepest parts, indeed, and even in the Marina Trench, she mentioned that, and elsewhere, right throughout, not just the Great Garbage Patch in the Pacific, but right throughout our oceans and waterways, the seven seas. There are plastics at the very bottom of our oceans, and if we are serious about climate change, we are serious about taking action to make sure that our planet is the best it can be in the future, then our oceans are going to play a huge part in that, if not the largest part in that, because if we continue to pollute our oceans at the rate that we are, then heaven help the planet. Now, the Great Garbage Patch in the Pacific, and this might come as a surprise, was first identified in the 1940s, and that is quite incredible. The rubbish that we have been putting into our oceans has been going in there for decades, but the Great Garbage Patch is getting larger and larger and faster and faster, at a faster and faster rate, and that is of great concern, because if we don't do something about it, don't address, first of all, the amount of plastics that we are producing, then our oceans have no chance. And it's things such as shirts, it's things such as the products and packaging that we're putting out into society. Now, the coalition government is often maligned unfairly by the actions that we took on the environment and on climate action. But I have to say, and I'll give a shout out to the former Environment Minister, the current member for Farrer, for what she did in this regard, in this respect. And I know that even in April 2021, she was out there announcing an additional $100 million investment to continue leading the world, this is Australia, and our region in how we manage our ocean habitats and coastal environments and contribute to the global task of reducing emissions. And in the media release put out on the 23rd of that month, it stated, as the world's only island continent, Australia has always understood that how we manage our oceans and coastal environments will determine the success or failure of our world's efforts to address climate change. That is why we have been leading the world in taking action in this important area. And it is an important area because, as I stated, if we don't get it right with the oceans, then the world, the planet, has no chance whatsoever. And it's not only good for the environment, it's actually, and not only the right thing to do, it's actually good for jobs. The number of young people I encounter these days who are environmental scientists, who care deeply about what we are doing and how we are doing it with our biodiversity, with supporting oceans, with recycling and with climate resilience, but particularly with the oceans in mind, is quite remarkable. And I know that there's many companies. I had one come in to see me this week, but there's one also building a huge facility in Parkes in my current Riverina electorate boundaries, converting waste to energy, and that is to be commended. This, take note, on the Standing Committee on Climate Change, Energy, Environment and Water, the report that was handed down in May this year is important, because as the member for Macon has said, many Australians want to recycle correctly, but inconsistencies amongst state and territories have led consumers to believe that certain items are recyclable or compostable when they are not. And as he stated further, the committee recommends nationally harmonising the single-use plastic bans, waste collection standards and the container deposit scheme. Now, that is a big ask, because I can remember the pushback even in New South Wales when the container deposit system was put in place there. South Australia's had it for many, many years. And if you have a bottle, and I see the member for Boothby agreeing, if you have a bottle, I believe it's plastic or certainly glass, you can get a 10%, if not higher, refund on that. And I can remember growing up as a kid, we had that system in place whereby you could get money back on your rubbish, on your, well, it was your rubbish, but it was other people's as well. And kids would go around football grounds and around showgrounds, etc. There was very little litter. There's alliteration for you, but there was very little litter because kids would go around and collect it and go and refund it for lollies or whatever the case might be. But these days, it seems kids are so well off they don't actually have to do it. You don't see them carting around big bags and collecting all the bottles after a football game or event in an open area like a concert, etc. But this is an important take note motion, because our waterways are too important to get wrong. I would encourage and urge the committee and others to acknowledge the work that the Morrison government in particular did in this area. I know that Australia's strengthened support for a global plastics treaty was something that both the member for Farrer and the then Prime Minister Morrison pushed. The Pacific Declaration urges the international community to start work on a legally binding global agreement as soon as possible. That happened during our last term of government. Support for a plastic pollution treaty, it's grown exponentially from fewer than 70 countries to at the time that we very much supported and got very much behind it, more than 110 nations. And this is important. We have to get it right. Our oceans are too important not to, and we also need to address one of the hugest climate issues, and that is what we do about landfill.
I call the member for Dunkley.
I move that the debate be adjourned and the resumption of the debate be made an order of the day for the next sitting.
The question is that the debate be adjourned and the resumption of the debate be made an order of the day for the next sitting. All those of that opinion say aye. Aye. Against no. I think the ayes have it. I call the clerk.
Government business, statement number 1, further statements on ending gender-based violence.
Are there any statements? I call the member for Boothby.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Gender-based violence is an epidemic in our country. 39% of women have experienced violence since the age of 15. 31% of women have experienced physical violence and 22% have experienced sexual violence. 12% of adults reported having seen domestic violence against their mothers when they were children. Women are more likely to experience violence from someone they know than from a stranger, 35% to 11%. 25% of women have experienced violence, emotional abuse or financial abuse from a cohabiting partner since the age of 15. Women with disability are more likely to experience violence, with 50% of women with an intellectual disability experiencing sexual violence. 53% of women have experienced sexual harassment. On average, one woman is killed every 9 days by a current or former partner. According to the research group Counting Dead Women Australia, 64 women were killed in violent incidents in 2023. 4,620 women aged 15 or over were hospitalised due to family and domestic violence in 2021-22. Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander women are 31 times more likely to be hospitalised by family and domestic violence, with non-Indigenous men making up a significant portion of the perpetrators. Our Watch research shows that around 25% of men in Australia say that they have used physical or sexual violence against women. Gender violence against women is estimated to cost Australia $26 billion a year. Financial abuse is estimated to cost $10.9 billion, of which $5.7 billion is borne directly by the victims, those same women who turn up in homelessness shelters in their latter years. Deputy Speaker, we talk a lot about family and domestic violence in this place, and they are some very sobering statistics. In 2022, the government launched the National Plan to End Violence Against Women and Children. This is a 10-year plan for state and Commonwealth governments that looks at prevention, early intervention, response, recovery and healing. In the last 3 budgets, this government has invested $3.4 billion. States and territories fund services. Not-for-profit and charities fundraise for services. And still, these statistics persist. And each statistic represents countless lives, real human beings, lives lost, suffering, fear, disadvantage. To say this is an epidemic is understating it. If any other cause of death and injury, not to mention cost to the taxpayer and the economy, if there were anything else causing this much damage to 51% of the community, it would be an emergency. And I think it's sometimes easy to think that everyone knows this, everyone cares, everyone wants something done about it. In here, we talk about this quite a lot. We hear the statistics. We meet the survivors and the families of those killed. But I know that every time I put something up on social media about women, it doesn't even have to be about violence against women, I need to keep a sharp eye out for the trolls. And I do wonder if maybe the language we use is wrong. As we know, the term just a domestic used to be used to minimise what was happening behind closed doors, to clearly align that this was a private matter. Maybe using terms like domestic violence also minimises what is happening. Maybe if what we refer to is happening as murder, assault, torture, it might get through the seriousness of what is happening to a very significant part of the Australian population. Because the definition of the word domestic is relating to the running of a home or to family relations. And the only relevance here is that some of it happens in a domestic setting. Deputy Speaker, I would like to finish by dedicating this speech to the late Helen Oxenham, OAM. Helen Oxenham was a stalwart of the women's movement in South Australia. She grew up in a violent household in Ireland, one of 6 children, where her mother experienced violence and the children saw it. After migrating to Adelaide with her husband and hearing the stories of her friends going through similar violence with no supports, no services, she was instrumental in setting up the first women's shelter in Christie's Beach in 1977. She sold lamingtons to fundraise to support this. Helen spent her entire life campaigning against domestic violence and to promote gender equity. She died recently at age 93, and her Irish funeral and wake was attended by hundreds of mourners, from women that she had helped over the decades, their adult children, or now adult children, to leaders in the gender equality movement, in the anti-domestic violence movement, local community groups, politicians and community leaders. Vale Helen, and thank you for all you did. You made a difference to so many lives. Thank you.
The question is that the document be noted, and I call the member for Latrobe.
It's a division.
I thought it was a quorum, right?
It is a quorum.
Okay.
It's quorum call, but...
That's okay.
It's a quorum. If one of you can stay, we'll keep this going, but if it's... I've been told it's a quorum.
It's up to you. If you both go, we'll lose quorum and have to suspend the Federation Chamber, but that's up to you. Yeah, you can do that. That's right.
Is it a quorum or a division? It's a quorum. Okay.
It is definitely a quorum.
That's okay, Ron. All good.
That's all right. That's fine.
That's it. It's okay. It stopped. It stopped. It stopped.
So it was a quorum, they got enough people in there.
It's the closest. No,
you're right.
I call the member for Latrobe.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I rise to speak on this very important statement when it comes to ending gender-based violence. And the sad reality is when you look at the figures, family violence, it sounds awful to use the word family violence, but the figures are going up all the time. But can I say in some manner that things haven't changed? I go back to my time in the Victorian Police Force, And the amount of times, and I was at Brainley Criminal Investigations Branch, where there would be a violent domestic, and sadly it was always the woman who would end up being badly beaten, in other cases raped, and it was all about control. And I remember one time in particular, one of the saddest ones, we had a lady who was badly beaten, and we put the brief together. We're going to the county court to charge the husband, and then came in a month later to withdraw the charges against him, and in the background was the husband just kind of giving us a wink. That's what happens in those days. The police wouldn't actually push a case unless you've got a victim, and when they come to family violence, it has changed for the better over time, where the courts actually take action on the police, even though you can have a reluctant victim. If I can just talk about the Latrobe stats, and sadly, Latrobe in the southeast of Victoria, we hit the media for all the wrong reasons recently when it came to Cardinia Shire crime stats. Family violence rates up 7.3% compared to the previous year, and amazingly, 1,669 incidents recorded up to March 2024. Can I just say, when it comes to the government, I know they've promised an additional 500 workers, and currently the promise has delivered 352 of the 500 frontline workers, so that hasn't met the target, must meet that target. So that was their estimate at the moment, and they had to get to 136. That's all they have at the moment. And can I say, community legal centres are so important, and I've had a great lot of dealings with the Narrawong Community Legal Service and the support they provide to women in particular. And I want to really focus on migrant women. That's I suppose the number one issue when it comes to my office, and also Shadow Minister for Multicultural Affairs. And to give an incident of what happened not long ago, the police, Victoria Police, did a fantastic job. They arrested a person who was threatening to have his wife deported back to another country, I won't say the country, and she had the courage to call Victorian Police. They came and arrested him, and my office had been dealing with this lady, and we found out what he'd actually been doing, and this is something I've actually written to the Victorian Chief Commissioner about, and I'll just put some of the issues which we had. We find when it comes to multicultural communities, they don't really understand, especially if a person hasn't been there in Australia for a number of years. In this case, the person had been, but had no idea, been totally isolated by the husband. When it came to her permanent residency, the husband would get all the emails from immigration, never apply for permanent residency, wouldn't allow her to get a driver's licence, said you don't need to work. If she went out anywhere, she'd be bombarded by SMSs and calls where you are. And it's what we call coercive control. And it's something when the police actually took the offender, the husband, to court. In actual fact, he was locked up for 2 weeks. And but the problem was when it came to the victim, didn't have any understanding of the court process at all. Thought she was had to get legal representative to take her husband to court and defend herself. So that's when we had to go and explain to what was occurring. So I've suggested to Victoria Police to take a proactive stance when it comes to court proceedings, and I've made 2 points. In cases of breaches of intervention, it is important for the victims to understand that police act as the prosecutor. It's not the requirement for the victim to actually get a lawyer, and the aggrieved member does not necessarily need to engage a lawyer, and it would be prudent for the police to maintain regular contact with victims, perhaps every 2 weeks. While this may be time-consuming, it would provide much-needed support to the victims who often feel isolated. So I'm looking forward to Victoria Police's response in this issue, and it is a big issue. And when I speak to multicultural communities, and can I say family and domestic violence is not affect only one community group, it affects the entire Australia, doesn't matter where you were born or where you've come from, born in Australia, born overseas, it's absolutely devastating, the family violence and in particular the murders we have. 1 in 4 women have experienced family violence from intimate partners since the age of 15, which is an absolute tragedy. And you look when it comes to murders and everything else like that, it's been absolutely horrific what has taken place over the years. I think it's one thing, a woman gets murdered every 6 days. When I have previously spoken to the homicide squad in Victoria and said, is there like a common denominator when it comes to these murders? And it's simply when they say the murder, it becomes an issue all about control and winning the argument, and it doesn't matter. The person who's the offender is not thinking about jail, not thinking about consequences, just must win it at all costs, which is absolutely an awful situation. So can I just ask the government if I can table that letter to the Victorian Chief Commissioner of Police, as discussed before?
Yeah, happy to table.
Thank you very much. I'll table that document to the Chief Commissioner. And just when it comes to our plan, and there's something the Opposition Leader Peter Dutton's been very passionate about, is doubling the size of the Australian Centre to Counter Child Exploitation. It's such a tragic thing where you find, and again I go back to my days in the police force, every Monday morning you come in as a detective at Brainy Criminal Investigations Branch, and sadly there'll be some young, mainly a female, being abused over the weekend at a sleepover. So the other thing I'm very passionate about is a national child sex disclosure scheme. We did research with Dr Rick Brown from the Australian Criminal Institute, where we found out when it comes to recidivist offenders that, and I think it was like 1,700 actually had reoffended. The average age of those targeted was an 11-year-old girl, and the most interesting and saddest fact too was when a recidivist offender commits their crime, it's normally in the time span of, say, 10 years, where the victims may have grown up, or the offender's gone interstate, goes to a new area, and then he would swap, his target he could swap from male to female. It's very absolute predatory behaviour, as described to me by Dr Rick Brown. So that's something I'm very passionate about. I don't know why we still haven't got a national child sex offender register. It's something I'll continue to push very hard for. It's so important to do. Also, on our side, it's extending emergency payments to support women and children fleeing domestic violence, which we established back in 2021, and tougher bail laws applied to Commonwealth offences. Again, just finishing off when it comes in particular to migrant women who may have come to a country where they don't trust law enforcement or authorities, and they have issues with language and cultural barriers and isolation from families and support networks and lack of awareness about available services. This is something which is very, very important to make sure from Home Affairs when it comes to immigration, that women, when they do arrive, they get provided with this information. And one thing on this side too, we wanted to change the character test. If a person was here on the visa and committed family violence, their visa would be revoked and deported. Sadly, the government didn't support that. And the other one I'm very keen on is what I call friendship cafes, women friendship cafes. I remember going to Wasima, Women's Association, South East Melbourne. All these women would come together from multicultural communities. I'll discuss issues from family violence to support. But the other thing which is so important, when it came to coercive powers, the husband would stop them going for a cafe, a restaurant, gym or anything else, would allow them to go to school to drop off the kids, and that's where the cafes were most effective in supporting women. Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker.
I call the Minister for the National Disability Insurance Scheme and Government Services.
Thank you very much. I think a lot of Australians sometimes think that our political system is broken and that not very much happens in Parliament, and they get sick of the to and fro. And we have an adversarial system in our Parliament, but I want to say to Australians listening to this debate that on the issue of gendered violence, the whole Parliament does think it is important, and the parliament as a whole, and you listen to the excellent contributions so far, I think every member of parliament knows that we've got to do better. We wake too often to a story of another woman being murdered by someone who said they love them. And enough is enough is enough. We cannot become immune to this tragedy or shrug our shoulders and say, well, that's just the way things are. Family violence, violence against women and children, does not distinguish between the suburb you live in, what school you went to, how much money you have in the bank account, what ethnicity you are, what part of Australia you live in. The data shows that 2.2 million Australians have experienced physical and or sexual violence from their partners. 2.2 million. And it says that 3.6 million Australians have experienced emotional abuse from a partner. And let's be honest, that's just the people who are willing to say they experienced emotional abuse. And then you've got the kids who have to live with the trauma of abuse. And that's a little bit about what I'm going to talk about today. Men can experience violence, like women, and most blokes are simply not violent. But the research is clear, there's a gendered pattern. Women are disproportionately, hugely, and their kids, the victims. Women are much more likely than men to experience sexual and emotional violence from an intimate partner. And the numbers, I'm afraid, don't lie, although I want to move beyond the numbers. That 1 in 6 of our sisters, mothers, daughters, fellow Australian women have experienced physical or sexual violence from an intimate partner since the age of 15 is terrible. I think it's about 1 in 18 men. 1 in 4 women have reported experiencing emotional abuse by an intimate partner since the age of 15, and that's the ones who report it. But gendered violence is not new in this country. We're better at talking about it, and we're better at measuring some of it. But I know that for a lot of our colleagues in the parliament, but also perhaps a lot of adults listening to parliament today, think back to your school days. There might have been a kid who turned up with bruises they didn't want to talk about. Perhaps there was just the weird kid who no one picked for the team, could sit in the corner, didn't seem to have much lunch. And perhaps there were the kids who you would talk to at school who would make every excuse not to have their friends come to their house. So I think for generations the signs have been there, but the awareness and the willingness to go hard against the issue hasn't. I know that today or tonight there'll be too many children living in dysfunctional homes. There will be kids tonight who might even come home from secondary school and uni, and their mum will have the light on or off on the porch. And that'll be a signal to say if Dad is in a good mood or not. Your home shouldn't be where you feel that you've got to walk on eggshells as if you're negotiating a minefield. I know that tonight there'll be so many households where there'll be mitigation strategies in place to try and appease anger and aggro. I also understand that some of the men who do these heinous things can be great blokes in the workplace. They can be a friendly neighbour, street angel, home devil. And I get that for men who perpetrate violence against women, there could be reasons. They could be in the grip of alcoholism, and alcohol is an accelerant here, drugs, gambling. Maybe their own childhood was terrible and they didn't have good role models, and that trauma of their childhood just replicates. These things may explain it, but they cannot excuse it. They're committing crimes. And what is so difficult, though, is there'll be women with a desire to escape violence, but overwhelmed by the need to stay. It could be financial. It could also just be the need to protect the kids. It could be the uncertainty of fear of the change. Or it could also be they're worried about angering the perpetrator even more. Division. Oh, I don't have to go.
The Federation Chamber will suspend to a later hour. I call the Minister for the NDIS and Government Services in continuation.
These men are committing crimes, and women have reasons why they can't flee. We know it's a crisis. Successive governments have started to tackle it. We're investing $925 million over 5 years. It builds on record measures of the current government to address violence against women. The 10 days paid family and domestic leave, the largest increase in rent assistance in 30 years, investment in crisis accommodation, affordable housing for women. As Minister for Government Services, I can't solve the gendered violence crisis, but I'm going to break down the silos within and across government so women who confront questions about to stay or go can find their decision easier. I've asked my public servants to work towards the idea of joined-up services. So if a woman's fleeing a violent partner, she can have on her card a curated and ready-to-assistance, ready-to-use system. Her phone could prove who she is, immediately connect her with a dedicated social worker, commence a crisis payment, find suitable accommodation, and if she chooses to apply for an AVO, she could be connected to law enforcement to commence the process. We need to break down the plague of fiefdoms in our public service, because if we can have a simple identification which gives the woman the freedom to exercise choice, then perhaps we'll save more lives. But I really wanted to finish my contribution talking about the issue that gendered violence is a man's issue. It is men who, by and large, are the problem. Men learn from the trauma of their own childhood, and some repeat it. It's an interesting question why men who had abuse in their own childhood turn out to be good fathers and husbands. I think that if they don't repeat it, it's often because of the influence of strong mothers and other women in their lives. Young boys tonight will learn about violence. Young girls will learn. But the young boys who learn it, if they don't have the right role models, the good men to guide them, then that violence will be intergenerational. We shouldn't kid ourselves. There will be beautiful 12-year-old kids tonight wondering if they win or lose in their dad's mood lottery. They know their dad's not always a bad fella. He might have undiagnosed depression. He might have had trauma in his childhood. He could just be frustrated that the life hasn't turned out the way it has. He could love the drink too much. But that doesn't excuse the violence. There are kids tonight in Australia who will have too few good memories of their childhood. Perhaps there was one trip to the beach, one attempt to teach them how to ride a bike. Perhaps they'll have the embarrassment of their father falling asleep drunk at the school prize night. We know that alcohol is an accelerant of violence. Gambling can be. For goodness sakes, sometimes some men use the excuse even of a losing football team. That is weak and pathetic. Aussie children shouldn't have to develop coping and survival strategies. They shouldn't have to turn up their AirPods louder, put headphones on. They shouldn't have to hope that dad falls asleep quickly at the table. They shouldn't have to hear their mother fighting to protect them from their father. Children should not have to learn to disassociate the world they live in outside the house and the times that their aggressive father comes home. I know tonight there'll be many Australian mothers who will be shields for their children. We have to educate our young boys to respect women, but we have to break the intergenerational trauma. We must encourage men to examine their own childhoods and deal with the trauma. We've got to also teach people that the toxic masculinity of the Tates, the Rogans, of the Petersons of the online world is not the real world. It is alarming in the digital age that 25% of teenage boys look up to social media personalities who perpetuate stupid, old-fashioned, violent attitudes. We're funding a 3-year trial to see how we can do it. My colleague Amanda Rishworth has announced the Healthy Masculinities Project trial. But at the end of the day, I'm asking men in Australia to step up. I can't change what happened in your childhood, but you can be the father to your kids that you always deserved but perhaps never had.
I thank the Minister and I call the member for Cowper.
Well, thank you, Deputy Speaker. And I'm pleased to rise to speak on stopping gender-based violence, domestic violence as we know it. The first thing I would like to say, Deputy Speaker, is that everyone in this place has the same intention, and that is to rid domestic violence from our societies. And this should be bipartisan. And the speeches that I've heard today, wonderful speeches, wonderful intentions. I will never criticise anybody across the floor or cross parties, because we have all tried and we have all failed. And we continue to fail, but our intent is there. We want to help, we just need to get the right measures in place. So it is very pleasing, our government, what we did in the last few terms and what this government is doing, taking steps in the right direction to reducing gender-based violence or domestic violence. I am very privileged to be in this place, but I think I'm more privileged to actually have the role as Shadow Assistant Minister for Prevention of Family Violence. It is something that I'm extremely passionate about, and I've travelled around Australia talking to victim advocates, survivor advocates, agencies, police. I have been to every state and territory in the cities, in the regions, and in very remote areas, talking to those people on the front line or who provide those services. And one thing I can tell you, Deputy Speaker, is every single agency, every single person is stretched beyond imagination. They are overwhelmed by the amount of domestic violence in their communities, but they're also overwhelmed by the lack of resources. And we see, and credit to the government, $3.4 billion in this budget going towards the National Prevention Plan. $3.4 billion. But of that, 17% goes to prevention and intervention, which means that 83% goes to response and recovery. Now, that's been described by all the agencies, all the people that I've spoken to, as the ambulance at the bottom of the cliff. We are not addressing the causal problem. To put 17% into prevention and intervention is not going to change anything. We are just going to keep going around and around and watching the same things happen over and over again. I'm not suggesting for one moment, Deputy Speaker, that we should not be funding those crucial agencies, those crucial services. But what I'm saying is we should be matching dollar for dollar prevention and intervention to response and recovery. Otherwise, we'll be standing here in another decade saying that domestic violence is still a blight on our society. So the first step in changing this cycle is funding those agencies and putting the money there for the programs that are required to change society and to change the way we think. And it was very pleasing to read the report that came out from the Domestic Family and Sexual Violence Commissioner, Michaela Cronin. And I'm referring to page 13, where the Commissioner says in the key findings, engaging men. Men must be a part of every aspect of ending violence. Governments must support efforts to redefine masculinity and engage men effectively. More intervention options for men using or at risk of using violence are needed, which take a trauma-informed approach, improve information sharing and risk assessment and management. It is really pleasing, Deputy Speaker, to hear the change in the conversation and the change in attitude. Men are the problem, but men are also the solution. And we've now come to that reality. We have recognised that. Because if you don't change, and we know 8 out of 10 offences are caused by men or committed by men. Yes, they may be coming from a place of trauma. Yes, they need to be punished. But there needs to be those programs and those supports to change the thinking. And not just changing the thinking of offenders, male offenders, but having those programs out there for men's mental health, men's well-being. I heard a figure yesterday, Deputy Speaker. In the budget, women's health receives $187 million a year. Men's health, $7 million a year, compared with $187 million for women's health. I'm absolutely committed, yes, women's health should receive the funding. But why is there that disparity for men's health? A healthy male is a healthy father, is a healthy member of the community. That just doesn't come down to physical health, but it comes down to mental health. And we know that mental health contributes to this vile situation of domestic violence.
So we need to change that. We need to fund men's mental health. And I met with Movember last week, and congratulations again to the government in their partnership with Movember. It's a great step forward because they work with men and they create men's programs to make healthy males. And we've heard about young men turning towards social media to toxic masculinity, looking for answers. Well, flip the coin, and Movember is there to help our young men, to help our men be good members of the community. But we also need to have put in place a generational curriculum in our education system. It's not just outside, it's not just let's deal with men. Let's change the way we look at things. And I was privileged enough to speak with the Education Minister for Indonesia, Nadiem Makarim. Minister Makarim was a tech billionaire by the time he was 30. He was tapped on the shoulder by the President and said, "I want you to be my Education Minister." What the minister did was implement into the national curriculum, just like maths, English, reading, writing, he put in there respect and respectful relationships. And it was a holistic program. And it was about not just how to treat women, but how to treat each other and how to be a better member of society and what is expected. And within 2 short years, not only had incidents of chauvinism or assault had decreased significantly, but the academic excellence had gone through the roof. That's what we need to do here. We need to have a national curriculum, an education system which incorporates this. Not one day a year, and those programs like Love Bites, they're fantastic programs. But it has to be like maths, like English, a couple of times a week. You get tested on it, just like they do in Indonesia. And that needs to go on a journey from kindergarten through to year 12 with that child. Whether that child is male or female, it's irrelevant. That's exactly what we need to do. And until we implement those things, until we change the funding modelling, until we change the conversation in society, until we change the education system, and until we bring men into the room, then we'll continue to go on this roundabout. It'll continue the same-o since time immemorial. So, Deputy Speaker, again, this is something that we should be on the same page with. I'm always happy to talk to my counterpart across the floor, to work with the government to improve the systems, and hopefully in a generation's time we won't be having this conversation. Thank you.
I thank the member and I call the member for Riverina.
Here. A fine contribution from the member for Cowper. As we know, he is the Shadow Minister, combating, helping to end the scourge of gender-based violence. And he would know, having been a police officer who would have seen far too many sad examples in his line of work of domestic violence. And he followed the member for Maribyrnong, former opposition leader, who also made a sterling speech in this debate. It shouldn't be a debate, it's actually an ill-named word for this because it's not a debate. It's a discussion about what we could and should and must do. Of course, we also heard from the members for Latrobe, also very much involved in law enforcement, and as well as the member for Boothby. And they were all very good contributions. And this parliament is always best when we are on the same page, and when it comes to combating gender-based violence, we certainly are as one. And there is much to do, not just at a federal level, but indeed at a state and local government's level as well. But as communities, as families, as individuals, much more must be done. And the incidence of gender-based violence, which leads to unspeakable deaths, is just so tragic. And I know, even in my own Riverina electorate, Molly Jean Ticehurst, she died at the hands of an alleged perpetrator who was a former intimate partner, 22nd of April this year. She was the loving mother of little boy Nate, who will grow up not knowing the love and comfort and support of the unbreakable bond of a mother and child, mother and son. He will not have that. And that is just so sad. And I know that members of her family and wider circle of friends are seeking a wellness hub for women, a one-stop shop as it were. Probably another misnomer to call it a shop, but a refuge, somewhere that women can go in Forbes in central western New South Wales in the Riverina electorate. And I know the Mayor, Phyllis Miller, a marvellous person. He's advocating also for a 24/7 policing presence in that town. And no one knows whether that would have avoided the circumstance, the tragedy that befell poor Molly. But I tell you what, at her funeral, it was said that people believed she would one day change the world, move the nation. She shouldn't have had to do it in this way. Many people were so moved by her loss and the grief, which was just poured out at that football field at her funeral, was immense, was immeasurable. Premier Chris Minns, who had a tragedy in his own family, lost his dad just the day before, attended the funeral, and I commend him for the leadership that he showed in doing just that. But it's not just Molly, and it's not just this year. This has been going on for too long, and the death of Hannah Clark, and we all remember the scenes in that suburban street in Brisbane, Camp Hill, where Molly and her three beautiful children, Alea, just 6, Liana, only 4, and little Trey, 3. And they all lost their lives, and Hannah was only 33. Her life extinguished by her former husband. It's just grief beyond comprehension as to their loss, and we should turn these tragedies into action nationally and in our own homes and communities to do something about this. Now, in Wagga Wagga recently, the Wagga Women's Health Centre, which has been operating since the 1970s, had what they called Australia's first men's leadership forum on domestic and family violence. I have to say, at the rally which followed Molly's passing, held in Wagga Wagga in the Victory Memorial Gardens, the most outstanding speech given on that day was by Joanna Elms. There's not much of Joanna. She's a pocket dynamo, and she spoke so passionately about what we needed to do and how we could do it to end gender-based domestic violence. And it was her and her cohorts at the Wagga Women's Health Centre who came up with the idea of a men's leadership forum. And there were just under 100 men who turned up, and it was only men. There were no women at the Wild Vine at Aura on that Friday, July 26. There were no men who were there at all. And we had speakers, Adam Blanche, he's a psychologist of 40 years with a special interest in the field of trauma and the psychology of interpersonal violence and the psychology of identity. We heard from Rhys Cummins, a Wagga Wagga local and founder of the Murrumbidgee Men's Group, and he works for Pathways Murrumbidgee in the drug and alcohol field, an exceptional spokesperson for men's mental health in the community. And we also heard from Dave Kramer. Now, Dave is a behavioural scientist dedicated to empowering individuals to create safe, equitable and inclusive homes, workplaces, schools and communities, but perhaps more importantly, he was a friend of Hannah Clark's. And he hardly kept it together as he related stories of Hannah's children, because he was very close to the family. And I spoke to him afterwards and told him of my admiration for the work that he is doing. He is making it a lifelong passion of his to do what he can to not only respect Hannah's memory to a national audience, but to make that national audience sit up and listen about the need to end gender-based domestic violence. And as the member for Cowper has said, we can and we must do more. And as the member for Maribyrnong quite correctly pointed out, it's up to men to lift their game, to, quite frankly, take ownership, take responsibility of this scourge on society and to do better. And from the forum in Wagga Wagga, there were quotes that the Women's Health Centre has put out saying that men who attended said that it was such an eye-opener, that also that people needed to start believing victims, that no community is immune from this, but we all need to, as communities, make sure that we speak up about it. And I can remember when one of my very first jobs when I ran a media agency was to help the Women's Health Centre with a campaign, No More Silence Against Domestic Violence. And it was true back then in the early 2000s, just as it's true now. But wouldn't it be wonderful if we had a society where we, yes, had an open discussion about these issues, but it was all in the past tense. We could say, well, when back then, but it's not back then, it is now and it is in the future, and we must lift our games very much, and it starts with men. We need to talk about mental health. We need to talk about how we can better deal with these situations, so that there are no future Molly Ticehursts, so that there are no future Hannah Clarks, and that women can live free in the knowledge that they can go for a run, they can go for a walk without having to look over their shoulder and worry about whether they're going to be attacked, that they can be free in their own homes without coercive control, so that they can live lives that us men get to enjoy and not even have to think about. Thank you.
I thank the member. And I call the member for Ryan.
Thank you very much, Deputy Speaker. Yesterday, the Domestic, Family and Sexual Violence Commissioner tabled her inaugural report to Parliament, designed to measure progress and impact of the national plan to end violence against women and children. The Commissioner warned that the women's safety sector is already buckling under huge pressure, and that when there's an increase in reporting, frontline services need more support to meet increased demand. We have an epidemic of men's violence against women, and our frontline services are doing the very best they can in a system that continues to tell them to do more with less. For the national plan to end violence against women and children to succeed, it needs to be properly funded. Because we need to be clear here, the true cost of not funding this plan will be women's safety, their lives and their children's lives. The women's safety sector has said that for a decade, and they've said this for a decade, that they need $1 billion each year to be able to help everyone who reaches out for help, rather than having to turn people away back to situations of violence. Labor has so far only committed less than 2/3 of this amount. I just want the government to recognise the horror that this poor system is actually inflicting, not only on those making the brave decision to flee violence, but on the staff who've dedicated their lives to helping the most vulnerable. It's traumatising, and it could be avoided if Labor provided the funds required for the national plan to actually succeed. If Labor continues to ignore the calls for more funding, they risk squandering another decade and more women's lives. Already this year, just this year, devastatingly, 45 women have been killed by violence. 45. We know this number because of the brave work of volunteer organisation Counting Dead Women Australia and their research through Destroy the Joint. The government doesn't even keep a national family and domestic violence death toll. The Greens have been pushing for years for the government to keep an FDV death toll. We need this important data to aid in awareness raising and prevention, and yet this work is done by volunteers. How many more women have to die for the government to actually do something useful about it? What's the price that women have to pay? For many, sadly, it's the ultimate price. Here's another cruel fact. First Nations women are 33 times more likely to be hospitalised as a result of violence and 6 times more likely to be killed. Yet we know that First Nations women are over-policed and under-supported. Our so-called justice system are weaponised against them. They experience systemic racism, victim blaming and very poor police responses. This government needs to do better for our First Nations women and children. We also know that women on low wages or income support are especially vulnerable without the resources to escape violent situations. Yet this government persists with the cruelty of keeping income support payments like JobSeeker below the poverty line and has the audacity to cry poor while dishing out hundreds of billions of dollars in tax cuts and handouts for the rich. And the housing crisis is felt even more acutely by women and children experiencing family and domestic violence. Women are forced to choose between abuse or homelessness because there's just nowhere for them to go. Let's be clear, our social security system is built on shame and humiliation, demonising those who need these supports. It's absolutely a further barrier for people escaping violence. And the government could have solved this. They could have solved this if they'd worked with the Greens on their housing plans. We can scrap negative gearing and capital gains tax handouts, build more houses and put a freeze and a cap on rents to make housing affordable so people don't have to choose between abuse and homelessness. And the money they make from scrapping tax handouts to wealthy property developers, they could invest that directly, Deputy Speaker, into crisis accommodation or funding the absolutely critical services our frontline workers provide to people escaping violence. But while the Labor government continues to underfund frontline family, domestic and sexual violence services, victim survivors are turned away from crisis accommodation and one woman is murdered every 4 days in this country. This issue should be above politics, and we've heard some very fine and heartfelt words from the speakers here today. It is well past time the Albanese government fully funded the organisations that actually do the hard work on the front line of this dreadful epidemic. Anything less is a betrayal to women, and the more Labor ignores this crisis, the more women will die. Thank you.
I thank the member. Member Filingiari?
I move that the Federation Chamber do now adjourn.
Is the motion seconded? I thank the member for McPherson. The question is that the motion be agreed to, and I call the member for Curtin.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. I love being a mum. I feel lucky every day that I have the opportunity to watch my kids grow. I also feel lucky that when my children were small, I had a network of mum friends with whom to share the ups and downs of being a new parent. Friends who were with me in the trenches of newborn and toddlers and who knew the worry and guilt that sometimes comes with figuring out how to be a mum. Now, I still have and treasure these friendships, and we still share parenting stories, but the worries about our children have changed. We're increasingly concerned about the state of the world we're leaving for our children, and importantly, how the world around us is affecting our kids' mental health. And this job has shown me it's not just mums who are concerned. Since being elected, I've been inundated with calls and emails and meetings with parents in Curtin who are worried about their kids' mental health, desperate to find out what they can do to help them access services and what can be done to address the causes. Last week, the Lancet Psychiatry Commission on Youth Mental Health was published, the product of a team of 50 leading psychiatrists, psychologists, academics and young people. It was reported in the media with headlines declaring youth mental health is a global crisis and youth mental health in a dangerous phase of decline. Now, the report, which was led by Professor Patrick McGorry of Origin, showed that over the last 15 to 20 years, there's been a 50% increase in the need for mental health care for young people. In Australia, 2 out of 5 young people and almost 1 in 2 young women are affected. The Commission looked at the global contributors to this increase, which included intergenerational inequality, unregulated social media, insecurity of employment and climate change. The statistics in the report are horrifying. Globally, mental disorders are the leading causes of disability among young people. Suicide is the leading cause of death among people aged 15 to 44 in Australia. But even when these illnesses do not cause death or disability, they're the most rapidly growing cause of lost human potential and productivity across the lifespan. Professor McGorry said, "This is the most serious public health problem we've got." Now, alarmingly, of the young Australians that have a diagnosable and treatable condition, only 50% of people with mental illness are getting access to care. Young people are falling through the cracks because they're too unwell or not unwell enough, or the wrong age, or medical services are fully booked, or because of a lack of appropriate models of care. I know that in my electorate it's almost impossible to access a child psychologist, with 12-month waiting lists to see a paediatric psychiatrist. For an electorate that has one of the best medical and hospital precincts in the state, this seems outrageous. The services that our kids need are just not available. One of the findings of the Lancet report was that mental health services are desperately underfunded. Mental health issues account for 45% of the disease burden for 10 to 24-year-olds worldwide, but only 2% of health budgets globally. I've discussed this with my youth advisory group, a group of Year 11 students who represent their schools and let me know what matters for the young people in Curtin and what they're worried about. Last year, one of the students wisely said, "We need to recognise that mental health challenges are not a personal failing, but a societal issue. Young people are facing an unprecedented level of stress and pressure, from social media to academic expectations to family and community dynamics. Reform is desperately needed so that we can support our children when they need it. We need to increase community awareness and education, especially about prevention and the social and economic determinants of mental health. We need soft entry to care that's rapid, easy and affordable, and which is youth-friendly and stigma-free. We need strong connections between mental health providers and schools. We need to integrate digital support across all stages of care, as well as before entry to face-to-face care. And crucially, we need to make sure that youth-specific care is reflective of the needs associated with the life stage of emerging adulthood. Care must be private and confidential, but support systems like family, education and employment must be engaged and supported. The government has committed to a review of youth mental health services, but I'm worried we're doing too little too late. I really hope that reports like that from the Lancet Psychiatry Commission will inform a substantial, significant response from government with funding commensurate to the problem. Our kids need us to act now.
I thank the member and I call the member for Layla.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Well, Deputy Speaker, we've returned to Parliament after the winter break and every Australian taxpayer having received a tax cut, and that's every taxpayer in my community. And the government has been focused again on our priority around cost of living relief, as well as continuing our legislative agenda to tackle the big issues and the big things that we as a country have to get to work on. And one of those, this fortnight has been the Future Made in Australia legislation brought into the Parliament. We want Australia to have more economic security. The Treasurer, Jim Chalmers, introduced in the Parliament an important plan that will see us investing in a future made in Australia. The plan will bring new jobs and opportunities to communities across the country. Our plan will make Australia a renewable energy powerhouse. It will maximise the economic and industrial benefits of the international move to net zero and secure Australia's place in a changing global economic and strategic landscape. There's news on renewables, with the Minister for the Environment and Water, Tanya Plibersek, having just approved Australia's biggest renewable energy project ever that will create 7,000 jobs. Sun Cable's Australia Asia Powerlink solar farm will generate enough energy to power 3 million Australian homes, generating almost 6 times the amount of energy a large nuclear reactor could deliver. The Albanese government is getting on with building cheaper, cleaner and renewable energy. We've now approved enough renewable energy to power 7 million homes. We have also approved a new wind farm in Victoria's northwest that will power 202,000 Victorian homes and help make power bills cheaper. It has been National Skills Week while we've been here, and I'm so proud that as a government we've helped more than 500,000 Australians enrol in fee-free TAFE, delivering cost of living relief for students and helping Australians get better paid jobs. We've also got legislation in the Parliament this week to wipe $3 billion in student debt for 3 million young Australians. This will help many students and young people with the increasing pressures of cost of living and their growing HECS debt. And it has been a big fortnight for gender equality. The Albanese government is focused on taking action on gender equality. This week we learned the good news that the gender pay gap is at an historic low of 11.5%. Women's average weekly earnings have increased $173 a week since we took office in 2022. And this is not an accident. This is about supporting rises in the Fair Work Commission for our lowest paid. It's about a 15% pay rise for aged care workers and a 15% pay rise for child early education and childcare workers and educators. And this morning, Minister Rishworth introduced the paid parental leave legislation, the most recent piece of legislation. This is critical for working families, and the bill will put superannuation on paid parental leave. This is an enormous change and means that families will end up with more superannuation for their later life. We've had legislation also to ban non-consensual sexually explicit deep fake content this week. This is important, particularly in our community in the west of Melbourne, where this has seen us in the headlines recently. Sharing deep fake sexually explicit material is a damaging form of abuse that overwhelmingly targets women and girls and inflicts deep harm on victims. We have zero tolerance for it and have introduced legislation to ban it. Our Assistant Minister for the Prevention of Family Violence, Justine Elliott, delivered a powerful statement in Parliament yesterday outlining how our government is made a priority to end violence against women and children. This week has also seen the anniversary of the Julia Gillard government on 21st of August 2010, something I know that those at home are celebrating. We started this fortnight with the Olympics finishing and celebrations in the private members' motion in the chamber, where some here joined me to congratulate our medalists and all of our competitors. This week I also got to meet with Victorian Education Minister Ben Carroll while he was in Canberra to talk about our local schools, and as an educator I was keen to have some time face-to-face with Ben to explain to him some of the needs in the local schools in our community. Thank you, Deputy Speaker. It has been a fantastic fortnight here in Canberra. Looking forward to being home for a couple of weeks and then back to get on with the legislative agenda beyond that. Thank you.
I thank the member and I call the member for Bass.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. I rise today to speak on the critical work that's undertaken across the country by community legal centres and the urgent need to address desperate funding shortfalls. There are 166 organisations across the country in the Community Legal Centre membership working in communities across the country, providing free information, resources, assistance and representation to avoid and resolve legal problems. These organisations receive funding through the National Legal Assistance Partnership, NLAP, of which the current agreement expires in less than a year and is currently being negotiated between the Commonwealth and states and territories. The sector is urgently calling on all parties to commit to both urgent funding this year and increased base funding ongoing. Centres are experiencing increasing demand for services, seeing hundreds of thousands of people each year. But as Tim Leach of Community Legal Australia said at an event in Parliament this week, we are having to turn away double the number of people we are able to see, and that is a national crisis. These services are on the front line in our communities, dealing with issues such as family violence, family law, financial security, safe and secure housing and discrimination. They deliver an invaluable service to some of the most vulnerable people in our community, but they operate beyond the limits of their capacity. I frequently hear from constituents who are unable to access support because the services are overloaded. But despite the challenges, centres have tried to innovate and introduce services to provide education and other programs. In April 2011, in my community, the Launceston Community Legal Service launched an innovative program to improve legal literacy in the community. The Legal Literacy Volunteer Program trains volunteers to provide regular outreach support in accessible community settings like neighbourhood houses, with the aim of helping people resolve non-legal issues like completing forms required by Centrelink and other government agencies and reading and understanding documents. This in turn relieves some of the pressure on the legal service provision by helping with more straightforward tasks which might otherwise fall to one of the centre's lawyers. It also helps people resolve problems early, often before circumstances can escalate or worsen, thereby avoiding the need for legal support in the future. Women's Legal Service also recognises this challenge in noting the benefits of health justice partnerships, saying 1 in 5 of the most disadvantaged in our community take no action in response to their legal problems for a range of reasons, including stress, time, cost, fear, or not realising it is a legal problem. Living in regional and remote areas is also a barrier. When people do seek help, they are more likely to ask a trusted non-legal professional, such as a health or community service provider. Leading women's legal and legal aid to embed free legal help into health and social service settings, such as child and family centres, with the aim of reducing family violence for Tasmanians. The Legal Literacy Volunteer Program is evidence-based, and importantly, volunteers collect data as part of the reporting processes, which provide necessary information for analysing community needs and measuring the effectiveness of the program. And the program has been extremely successful, but the centre has faced an ongoing funding issues challenge through the COVID-19 pandemic. The program, which is not funded under the NLAP agreement, lost state funding for 18 months, resulting in positions being lost and a lot of time and work to re-establish the program. Having now re-established the program, the centre has highlighted it during the recent NLAP review as a cost-effective model of legal problem prevention and early intervention. The centre hopes the NLAP review will result in increased base level funding that centres can operate innovative programs like this. These sort of programs should be encouraged and amplified right across the country, but it is simply not possible without additional ongoing reliable funding. Investing in the core services offered by community legal services is vital to ensure workforce stabilisation and meet community demand. As the sector has stated, the Commonwealth Government has a responsibility to provide community legal centres with consistent, guaranteed baseline funding. People in communities experiencing disadvantage deserve to feel certain the holistic, trauma-informed services they rely on will be accessible when and where they need them, and now and into the future. I call on the government to urgently turn its attention to this crisis and commit to increased support for this vital service.
I thank the member and I call the Assistant Minister.
Thank you. And Deputy Speaker, I rise today to acknowledge the extraordinary work of Rotary clubs in my electorate. And today I want to speak particularly about the Rotary Club of Ballina on Richmond. Now, my good friend, the wonderful Dame Harmon, is the former Governor of Rotary District 9640, of which Ballina branch is a member. And last year I hosted Dave and his wife Robin and members of the Ballina Rotary Club and many other Rotary clubs right here in Parliament to launch their campaign Rotary Says No to Domestic Violence. This campaign, which originated campaign in my electorate is a tremendous example of a community-led campaign that aims to increase the awareness of domestic violence in each and every neighbourhood right across the country. Since launching this campaign in November last year, Dave Harmon and the Ballina Rotary Club have stopped at nothing, absolutely nothing, to spread the word of their campaign. Rotary Ballina have encouraged businesses, community groups and sporting teams right across the electorate and everyone to join in what they call Purple Friday, a great initiative. So on Purple Friday, individuals and businesses proudly wear the purple shirt, Say No to Domestic Violence, very powerful. And these shirts have started hundreds, if not thousands, of life-changing conversations, proving that community-led campaigns such as this can make a real difference. The impact is massive. And indeed, they were recognised earlier this year with the Ballina Council Australia Day Awards, in which they were awarded the Community Event of the Year, a fantastic achievement for the work they're doing. Rotary Ballina has also created a toolkit to assist members in responding to domestic and family violence. And the toolkit contains vital information, including contact details and particularly those details for specialist referral services. And the toolkit has been received by more than 1,300 Rotarians. But Rotary Ballina hasn't stopped there. Over the past year, Dave Harmon has been meeting with a whole variety of organisations and governments, police services, including the New South Wales Police and most recently Queensland Police, to discuss establishing a memorandum of understanding. And in very exciting news, just last week, Dave informed me that Rotary and the New South Wales Police have formalised a 3-year partnership, and the Queensland Police will provide formal support for the Rotary Says No to Domestic Violence campaign. Due to the campaign's significant success, Dave's also recently told me that the Regional Council of Rotary Zone 8, which Ballina Club sits within, has committed to this campaign for the next 3 years. Incredible dedication from these Rotary clubs. And it is amazing the extent to which they've reached, and it really goes towards Dave's activities and what a truly inspirational person he is, and his wife Robin and the entire team at Ballina Rotary, considering it was less than a year ago it was launched. Now, Deputy Speaker, as the Assistant Minister for the Prevention of Family Violence, I know full well the huge investment this government has made to eliminate violence against women and children in one generation. And our commitment, of course, is backed by an investment of more than $3.4 billion. But our government can't do this alone, as we've repeatedly said. We need businesses, community groups and all individuals to work with us to step up to make this vital change right throughout the nation. And that's why I'm really proud in my electorate that we have the Ballina Rotary Club with this incredible initiative, and in particular I want to thank Dave Harmon for his community-led action and the difference that it's making every day right throughout our region. And they are essentially transforming the lives of so many people. And they've told me firsthand many people in businesses are wearing the shirts on Purple Friday, and they'll start conversations with people and they can then refer them for some assistance as well. It has really taken off. A lot of the Rotary clubs on the North Coast are wearing these the Purple Friday shirts, and a lot of conversations are being had right across the community. And as I say, the inspirational work of Dave is truly phenomenal, and I certainly look forward to keep working with him. And of course, the National Day of Action for the Rotary Pacific is on Friday, the 29th of November, and I really encourage all members to show their support. I also know that Dave and the Rotary Club from Ballina receives widespread bipartisan support as well. Indeed, at his launch, there were members from right across the Parliament as well, and I know that everyone in this House is committed to ending violence against women and children in one generation, and they were all there at the time when we did launch that as well, to show their support that we are all standing together. And again, I commend Dave and everyone at the Ballina Rotary Club for this great initiative and the work that they are doing. And it's Purple Shirt Friday, and here it is, and it's great if we can all be wearing that on Fridays to make a difference in each and every community right across the nation.
I thank the Assistant Minister, and just a reminder to all members in the chamber that we need to not use props. Thank you, Assistant Minister. And I call the member for McPherson.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Last night, the Parliamentary Friends of the Space Industry actually convened a very large group of not only space enthusiasts, but organisations, companies, businesses from right across Australia that are doing some fantastic work in the space industry. So I had the opportunity to meet with many of those people last night, some of whom I have worked with for a very long period of time, to hear from them about how the space sector is going in Australia. And clearly it is a sector that deserves and needs more support from the Australian government so that it can grow and meet our future needs. Now, to put some context around my comments, when I was the Minister for Industry, Science and Technology, I did commission the Standing Committee on Industry, Science and Resources to have a look at the space industry and its impact on Australia. And that report, in their report, they found that the global space industry is predicted to grow to be worth almost $1.5 trillion over the next 20 years. So there was a very strong endorsement of the policy at the time, which was the goal of the government to increase that sector so that Australia's space sector could build its revenue to around about $12 billion and create an additional 20,000 jobs by 2030. So that would give Australia a much greater slice of the space industry than we had at the time, and quite frankly, what we do have now. The obvious question is why the space industry and why is it important to us? And there are multiple reasons for that. So I'll just go through a couple of those today. Already space is part of our everyday lives, and we are becoming increasingly reliant on the space sector and what it offers to us. So things like online shopping, our e-banking, the news which we rely on coming through our mobile devices, staying connected with our friends, family, navigating our way through traffic, finding out what the weather is predicted to be. Importantly, it helps us with our disaster responses so that we get greater predictions and support of what is happening with things such as bushfires, with floods. We get much greater support to protect our borders, to keep Australia safe. So these are all very good reasons why we need to make sure that we support this sector in Australia and we do everything that we possibly can to grow it. Now, to be able to do that and to do that effectively, we have to ensure that we increase the number of people that we have with STEM qualifications and skills. So science, technology, engineering and maths. And there was a report that was released earlier this year, the STEM Careers Pathway report, which had some really interesting findings in it. We have all known for a long time that we need to encourage more people to study science and maths, particularly at school. The report that was released earlier this year actually reinforced it. And some of the statistics in there are actually quite alarming to me in terms of making sure that we do have the people that we need to fill the jobs of the future. So I'll just read through a couple of the quotes from there. Basically, what was found in that report is that over the 20-year period to February 2020, which was before the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on the labour market, employment in STEM occupations grew by 85%. Or more than twice the rate of non-STEM occupations, which grew by 40.2%. That trend continued over the subsequent years, and if I quote again, employment in STEM occupations using science, technology, engineering and maths skills is projected by the NSC to grow by 12.9%, well above the average of all occupations of 7.8% and more than twice as fast as non-STEM occupations, which is 6.2%. So to meet the urgent workforce needs that we have here in Australia, we not only must go through the process of ensuring that we are training our students at school to follow STEM pathways, but we also need to make sure that we're doing all that we can to retain people in the workforce, because we know that often people, particularly women, will move out of a STEM workforce for a whole range of reasons. The report actually focuses on some of the things that we need to do, and I would urge everyone in this parliament to do all that they can to ensure that we are increasing our STEM capability in Australia.
I thank the member and I call the member for Lingiari.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Brain Injury Awareness Week is held annually between the 19th and 25th of August to raise awareness of brain injury and its impact on everyday Australians. The brain is critical to how we think, feel, behave and act. Brain injury can lead to significant change in people's lives and can have devastating long-term effects if left undiagnosed and untreated. It was my great pleasure to host a presentation in Parliament House during Brain Injury Awareness Week of the Healthy Head campaign demonstration, which is running in Alice Springs and Central Australia. I appreciate the time given by the Minister for Health and Aged Care and the Assistant Minister for Indigenous Health to attend this presentation and learn about the importance of this campaign for my electorate. As a partnership between the Australasian College of Emergency Medicine, and I give a shout out to Dr. Stephen Gooley, who's also in charge of the Alice Springs Accident Emergency Hospital, Menzies School of Health, Alan Cass and all the staff with Menzies, and the Central Australian Aboriginal Congress. This campaign will help improve the treatment and management of concussion and head trauma for Aboriginal patients, in particular Aboriginal women. We are seeing a huge increase in the Alice Springs Emergency Department of Aboriginal women from domestic and family violence. This demonstration project will produce consistent best practice guidelines and protocols for treating head trauma injury presentations that will eventually be applied in hospital emergency departments and community health settings throughout Australia. Brain injury related to intimate partner violence often remains unreported or undetected during clinical assessments. Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander women are particularly impacted, being 60 times more likely to have a head injury due to assaults than non-Indigenous women. Recent research has highlighted various workforce barriers affecting pre-screening and diagnostic assessments of trauma brain injuries, including limited access to specialist neuropsychology services and stable primary health care professionals with remote expertise.
Is the member concluded?
Yeah.
I thank the member. The question is that the motion be agreed to. All those of that opinion say aye. To the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The Federation Chamber stands adjourned until 10:30 a.m, Monday the 9th of September.